everyone, Tally and Farrell here from Board of It, and today we're going to be talking about one of the most brutal, unforgiving, ruthless, interactive board game experiences around, Barrage. Now, fun fact, before anybody comments, the word barrage is pronounced differently in American and British English.
And I can attest to that because I speak both.
Yeah, unfortunately. The word barrage is originally a French word meaning dam, and the French pronounce it barrage. Barrage is set in a dystopic past where by 1930s we'd already rinsed through our supply of fossil fuels, so hydroelectricity is where the money's at. You play as an international company trying to build a series of hydroelectricity producing systems in the Alps.
And getting down to the nitty-gritty, this is a game where you're going to be managing resources, building dams, and producing hydroelectricity. But at its core, it's a pretty standard worker placement game in that each of your turns, you'll be putting a variable number of workers onto a worker placement space and then taking the action shown in that space. And I'm just going to say up front, this is one of my favourite games of all time. And we're also going to be talking about the expansion, the Leeghwater Project, just because it has a few cool modules and we pretty much don't play without it. And I've also just realised when setting them up for this shot, it really irritates me for some reason how the title's up here on this box and the title's down here on this box.
So you'll start with an asymmetric player mat, some engineers or workers, a personal assistant with a special ability, and some building materials. On your turn, you'll take one action either on your player mat or on the main board by paying any required costs and placing the required number of engineers on that space.
The main aim is to produce energy, because producing energy will get you VPs and money. To produce energy, you'll need a few things. You'll need a dam, either in your player colour or a neutral dam. You'll need a conduit, which can be anyone's colour, but if you use someone else's, you'll have to pay them for it. And you'll need a powerhouse, which does have to be in your colour. Finally, you'll require water. When you have all this, you'll put some engineers on the worker placement space that allows you to produce energy. Then you'll take as many water droplets as you want or can use, and they go through your conduit, down the pipe, into the powerhouse, and they flow downstream or off the board. And to produce your energy, you'll then look at the number printed on the conduit and multiply it by how many droplets you used. So say the conduit's 3, you move 2 droplets, then you'd produce 6 energy, and you'll move yourself up on the energy tracker.
At the end of each round, water in the headstreams up here flows downwards and follows the river until it reaches a dam. A dam can hold 1 water droplet, and for each elevation on top allows an extra droplet to be held. To build some of these structures you'll go to your player board. To build, you'll take the tech tile of whatever you want to build and put it in the wheel along with any resource costs. Then turn the wheel. Any tech tiles and resources spent are then unavailable until the wheel turns all the way back around, which you'll have to do manually by further building or using one of the spaces on the main board that lets you turn the wheel.
So the game will last for 5 rounds, and at the end of each round, you're going to be scoring for the energy you've produced and these end of round goals. There's also a game end goal, and these are always brutally confusing and will cause a lot of debates and arguments as you have to refer to the rulebook to see who's right and who's wrong and who's got the VP. But while we're on the topic of these end of round goals, we'd just like to mention some of our thoughts, because we do kind of wish that basically maybe they were tiered in some way so that certain ones would come out earlier in the game and other ones would come out later in the game. Just because some of them seem a bit silly if they come out in the first or second round. Like, I don't know, the external buildings from the expansion or completed contracts, because in the first round, it's very unlikely you'll have more than one completed contract, or that you'll have any of these external buildings or advanced tech tiles or whatever. So I think it would just be maybe a little more fun if this was structured a bit better, because sometimes they're just worthless depending when they come out.
Barrage is not for the faint of heart. Resources are tight. You can build 4 types of building and there are only 2 types of resource. Thus, if you build a dam, you're going to struggle to build a conduit as well of a decent value because they both use the same excavator resource. Want to get them back? Well, that's going to cost you all of your money to spin your construction wheel 3 times. However, what amazes us is that Barrage never feels unfair. You might struggle and grumble and scrape resources together in any which way you can, but you'll look back in round 5 having produced 30 energy and wonder how you put together such a terrific system.
Very true. And speaking of magnificent design, Barrage joins the cost of doing business with strategic value excellently. You see there's 3 different elevations on the map. You've got your mountains, your hills and your plains. And the higher up you build, the more it costs to do so. But say you build in the mountains. Yep, it's prohibitively expensive, but you do get first crack at any water that flows downstream. Or you could build in the plains, it's much cheaper and you probably get a good system out quicker. But if just one player builds upstream from you, they can divert any water that would come your way, rendering all your efforts moot. It's a really wonderful dilemma to be presented with. It is one of the most brutal and interactive games out there. Say you've just finished building a system and you're ready to produce. Joke's on you, you're not going to. Someone just built a dam right in front of you. Now all the water goes there first and you just get their overflow. Say you've built a system somewhere else and you're all ready to produce. You're just waiting for the flow to come from the headstreams down. Suddenly, no water's getting to you. What's happening? Someone's built ahead of you and they're diverting water into another river.
Those bastards.
And, you know, there's so many unique interactions to be had in Barrage, both positive and negative. And what happens is all in the palm of you and your friends' hands. And what is great is that all of this comes from one simple idea, that water is what everyone wants, water is shared, and water is hard to get.
The worker placement is also diabolically tight. Often the actions will have 2 spaces, but the one on the right-hand side has an additional monetary cost, which maybe is all right, but unless the action itself also has a monetary cost, which many of them do. So not only do you have to worry about what's going on over here, you also have to worry about what actions you do and when. Because if Farrell takes an action before me, then I won't be able to afford it.
Ideal.
Essentially, every decision you make in Barrage is crucial.
And this brings us on to something that will likely put a lot of people off Barrage. You see, if you make a mistake, there's no type of catch-up mechanic. It will definitely cost you and you will likely lose. You have to be on point the entire time you play this game. And just as a recent example, I accidentally early on bought an advanced tech tile and I spent all of my money on it. It turns out that advanced tech tile didn't do what I thought it did. So then I couldn't do that plan. I was left with no money to pay for any actions I wanted to do, alternate actions. And I think it's fair to say it cost me the game because I spent an entire round doing nothing. This game is not short and it can be quite stressful at times. So if you make a bad decision early on, it can really make for a miserable experience. Also, this game is quite heavy. We'd definitely only recommend it to experienced board gamers, and definitely consider everything we just said when considering this game and if it's piqued your interest.
So to summarise this section, we're going to talk about why we love it. Each action is meaningful, yet any action any other player does is probably going to be bad for you. It's almost sadomasochistic in the way that you interact with other players.
There's also no luck here, and even though the game is set up pretty much the same each time, each game plays wildly differently when you combine the actions of all the players with the predictable yet ever-changing droplets of water as they flow downstream. Each game you play is going to give you new opportunities, challenges and predicaments to face.
You'll be kept on your toes the entire game, and the unique options that your faction and personal assistant provide allow novel strategies to present themselves. So the expansion for Barrage, the Leeghwater Project, adds a new faction, new assistants, a new type of building, and a new type of contract. Now the faction and assistants are fine, nothing to complain about there, it's just more Barrage. But we do think that the new buildings are a bit of a miss. If you construct one, it gives you access to a special action that only players who have a building of that type can take, and also endgame VPs. Now, whilst that special action is pretty powerful, the amount that it costs to build the building is pretty high. So then it means that you can't build dams and powerhouses, which is the main focus of the game and the system that's going to get you the most victory points and money.
Now, the new contracts, termed external works, are brilliant. Here, you trade building resources in exchange for whatever's on the contract. The twist is that you lose these building resources permanently. They don't go in your wheel. And this is great because, first of all, the contracts are well balanced and they're interesting with what they provide. And secondly, it creates these Faustian deals where you're basically selling off your ability to build in the future or provide for yourself in the future for things that you need immediately or things that you want at that exact moment. It's a devilish dilemma, and these external works contracts are actually one of my favourite aspects of Barrage. And this brings us indirectly to the play count, because these buildings we're talking about, they get ignored. Also, other aspects are ignored in a 3 or 4 player game, such as the advanced tech tiles, for the simple reason there's no time and no spare resources to waste on these actions.
In a 3 or 4 player game, the map is so overcrowded and everyone is so desperate for the right action or water that all of your effort is spent on creating an energy producing system. There just isn't time to explore the expansion buildings or the tech tiles and turn them into a game winning strategy. Take the tech tiles for example. In a 3 or 4 player game, all of your money is going to be spent on actions because there's more players taking the actions you desperately need. Often, they don't even get a second look.
And at 2 players, it's still as brutal, but there's definitely less tightness in the fight for the worker placement spaces and on the map. This means you're able to explore these other things a little more, but they haven't convinced us that they're worth the hassle. But the good thing is, because they're optional, they don't negatively affect the game if someone gets them. They're not overpowered or anything. It's a strategy they have to work with. So use them, don't use them. It doesn't negatively affect the game. And Barrage is still great. On the topic of things that get passed over in Barrage, this unfortunately also includes the faction abilities. To unlock them, you have to build your 3rd powerhouse, which is totally arbitrary and a little bit confusing when you first play the game. I have no idea why you would even bother having different factions if the only difference is a power that you might get to use once or twice if you do one very specific thing. In addition, you also get these personal assistants, and often their powers are on par, so I don't know why you couldn't have just also had the faction power unlocked at the beginning of the game. Personally, we think it would be a lot more fun if you had the powers unlocked at the beginning of the game, or if maybe it was just linked to getting your 3rd building out of any type.
So just as a last note, the components are all pretty cool. Each faction has personalised wooden buildings, which is a nice touch, and the building resources are quite unique. We also love the art direction on the board and on the box, and the board is double-sided with a beautiful advanced side, which is free of labelling for when you're more familiar with the game. It is worth noting though that there was some controversy around the Kickstarter. We believe many people received their copies with broken or missing components, and the whole thing was handled quite poorly. It is a shame because it detracted from what is otherwise an amazing game, and maybe the reason why Barrage generally flies under the radar. We bought the retail version, so can't comment on the Kickstarter, but one of our wooden buildings did arrive broken.
In summary, we believe Barrage to be one of the greatest games to come out of the last few years, claimed supported by its slow but sure movement up Board Game Geek's Top 100. If you're looking for a game that is unique, strategic, thematic, with minimal elements of luck, let me introduce you to my old pal Barrage. It also has my favourite box artwork of all time.
We believe that the expansion is also something to invest in, as the external contracts really open up the game. If you're not afraid of a big, heavy board game, I don't know why you're still watching this review, to be honest, just go and buy Barrage already.
Go buy it.
Go buy it.
You're missing out. Go get it.
If you enjoyed this review, we would really appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already for regular board game reviews, always with a little hint of Doggo.
And thanks for watching.
Thanks for
we
watching.
really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye.